Everyday people working 9 to 5, saving up that money, trying to survive, investing in the future, trying to be wise, to loving money heroes. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Nik Johnson, host of Everyday Money Heroes, and I've reached early retirement. I'm here to provide information on how to obtain financial independence and inspire you through sharing stories of everyday people who are turning knowledge into freedom.
That hustle, always reaching for the sky. We wanna be money heroes, never gonna shy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyday Money Heroes. We provide information and inspiration to people of all ages to take control of their financial journey. I am your host, Nik Johnson, and today we have Eric Peterson here with us. A little bit about Eric before we get started. Eric escaped the 9 to 5 grind and retired at the ripe old age of 31. He is now on a mission to help other young professionals do the same. Eric believes if we can all worry a little less about money, spend more time and energy on the things that matter to us, that we can really make a change in the world and make it a better place. So please assist me in welcoming Eric Peterson to Everyday Money Heroes. Hello, Eric.
Hey, Nick, thanks for having me.
Hey, no problem. It's great to have you here. And so first of all, when we hear 31 years of age, that's pretty early. At 31, some individuals are just figuring out what career path they want to take. At this point, you're kind of packing it up and you are just riding off into the sunset. So I guess what our audience wants to know is like, hey, how did that happen? What's your backstory? How did you get in position? And where some individuals would just really be starting their career to be able to say, you know what, I want to go and stop exchanging my time for money.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot to unpack there.
Hey,
I think
I'm here. Open the suitcase, Eric. Open the
No,
suitcase.
how much time do we have? This may be the first of many segments that we have,
All
but
right.
I think ultimately, first and foremost, I recognize I'm very fortunate, very privileged in terms of the situation that I'm in right now, and kind of how my professional and financial career has progressed. So I want to preface it that way. I know that I'm kind of the anomaly, right? And even
Mhm.
within the FIRE movement, and that's one thing I'm so passionate about is it doesn't have to be a certain way. So me doing it at 31, that's going to be the rarity. It is possible, right? If you start
Mhm.
early enough and if you do make the right steps, it is possible, but I mainly want to make sure that people aren't discouraged when they hear my story and thinking like,
Mhm.
oh, well, I can't do that. I'm not even going to try, right? It's like,
Mhm.
it's all about starting where you're at and then making intentional moves to get you where you want to be. And whether that's 31 or at 40 or 50 or 60 or whatever, right? Traditional retirement age is 65.
Mhm.
So anything before that is considered retire early. And
Right.
I'm sure we'll unpack and talk to a little more is it's really not even about the retire early piece, right? It's about
Mhm.
financial independence. And so for me, I sailed into the sunset, but I'm not sitting back just sipping pina coladas doing nothing, right? It just
Mhm.
I got to a point where now I can escape my 9 to 5 grind that I did for 10 plus years, and now I can focus on things that matter to me and doing the work that I'm passionate about, and that right now is being a financial coach, launching my business to help others achieve financial independence and retire early, or just really live the life that they want to live and spend their most valuable resource, which is their time, their energy on the things that matter most to them, whether that is a certain work or career path or just spending time with family, friends, their dog like me, right? And my
Mhm.
wife, or just with yourself, right? Like you spend so
Right.
much of your life on whether it's in school and in a work and under everyone else's schedule and everyone else's direction that you don't really have a lot of time to focus on yourself. And I definitely had to do a little bit of
Mhm.
that once I left my 9 to 5 job. So for me, I guess that's kind of the long preface to it. But with my story specifically, I all I knew was the traditional path. Growing up, my mom and dad, that was what they pushed. They were very, supportive of me and everything that I did. But it was always, hey, you go to school, you get good grades, you get a good job, and one day you'll be able to retire, right? If you do all those right steps. And so I did that, and then I went to school, got good grades, got a good job. But I always knew that there was something more than just working a traditional job or just working in general, right? There was more to life than that. And I didn't really know what that meant or how to get there, but I always knew that I wasn't going to work until I was 65, or at least a
Mhm.
traditional job. And all I knew at the time, I didn't know anything about investing, didn't know anything about it. All I knew was just, hey, put money away, right? My parents always
Mhm.
said save for a rainy day. So I was always saving. And then as I was in college and I started learning a little bit, and even more so once I started my career, I learned about investing, right? At least for traditional retirement. So 401k, Roth IRA, all of that. And I started doing that very aggressively from the start. I mean, at the time, I, again, was very fortunate, a good job. I think at the time out of college, I was making $60,000 per
Mhm.
year. And this was back in 2014.
Okay.
And at the time, that was not. I had friends that were making a lot more, but for me, I'm like, wow, that's more than I ever made, right? And
Right.
at the time, I was able to go and live at home for my first 2 years back in
Oh,
San Diego. So my
okay.
cost of living was extremely low. I
Mm.
wasn't having to pay rent. My parents were supportive of me in that way. My wife now, my girlfriend at the time, she was working a job, living in LA. So we weren't living together. So I was like, hey, I'm gonna live at home, spend a little quality time with my parents, save a little bit of money. My goal was to save up so that I could buy a condo or buy a place, right? Instead of
Mhm.
paying rent. Because that's, again, all I knew was the real estate path to get to that, right?
Mhm.
But at the time, it was, hey, I'm working my job, my costs are low. I'm going to invest as much as I can in my 401k, my Roth IRA while I can. And then anything moving forward, it's just going to be easier, right? If I've already set that base there, any future pay increases, anything else, it's kind of like that's on top of it. And that was probably the best thing that I did, definitely financially, because I was able to actually max out my 401k right when I started working. And I think at the
Mhm.
time, right, I don't know, the limits right now are probably like 22,000 or something, right? At the
Mhm.
time, I think it was closer to 16,000. And then same thing with my Roth IRA. So I did it early. And then every year after, even though, right, even after I moved out and started paying rent, and as cost of living a little bit goes up, I was still able to max out those retirement accounts from the start. So I
Mhm.
did that for 10 years in my 401k, my Roth IRA. And so I reached this point, you know, once I, and then, fast forward to, the pandemic and COVID, that was the big change there, right? Where I
Mhm.
was working from home and realizing how much I love just not being in the office and not spending the time in the commute going to the office. And I was kind of figuring out, like, how can I do more of this, right? How can I escape and do this? And I didn't know anything about the fire movement at the time. I started looking into real estate because, again, that's all I knew as the path out. And reading a real estate book actually led me to the fire movement and learning about that. And I really became obsessed with it and just loved it and loved the financial independence aspect to it, right? The freedom, the options, living a life on your terms, and financially being able to design your life in the way that you want it to be. Um, and I ultimately, as I'm hearing these podcasts and right, Bigger Pockets Money, Choose FI, the Mad Scientist, Stacking Benjamins, all of these ones, I started hearing the stories of other people that were coming on as guests and examples, and I started realizing I was like, wow, I'm kind of already there, or at least I'm close if I
Mhm.
make some of these intentional decisions and these moves. And so I started doing that and really got aggressive in those moves over the next several years to set me up to be able to leave my 9 to 5 and now be able to spend my time doing what I want,
Oh,
which is talking to you and spending time in my garden and going for a walk with my dog and spending time with my
wow.
wife and focusing on my business and helping other people through my financial coaching and doing all that, which is I feel more alive than ever. I'm still
Mm.
busy, right? I don't have all this downtime. I thought I was going to have a lot more downtime and everything. I'm like, man, I still feel busier than ever, but I'm busy with things that are really lighting me up and that are bringing me a bunch of joy. And I truly feel like I am making the world a better place, which is ultimately my mission. So
Wow, that is
that was a
awesome.
lot. I'll take
No.
a pause. I'll let you unpack a little bit.
No, okay. I'm going to unpack a little bit. So, a couple of things that you've mentioned, Eric, is that you get out of college, you're making $60,000 a year, and granted, you said this is the most money you had ever made your entire life. And one of the things that I preach to my kids, my nephew, and to my audience here is that one of the key pillars in being able to reach financial independence is living below your means.
Mm.
And so at that $60,000, you probably could have went out and you could have, started renting you a place, down by the beach or whatever if you wanted to. And, things might have been tight, but you probably could have made it. But then you went ahead that excess where you could have taken that money and start to invest into the market. So you can go ahead and have that money start creating additional money so that you can then start having that beautiful compounding interest so that you can
Mm.
go ahead and get to that whatever FI number that you need to be able to retire. So that's extremely important. One thing I want to pull out. Second thing is just that live with parents. Okay. One of
Mm.
the big things that I preach um, is that it's okay. There's this kind of this stigma around, okay, if you live with your parents, how, you haven't made it or you know what, if I could do it all over again, when I graduated high school, I would have stayed with my parents longer.
Mm.
Because as soon as I was like, oh, I'm 18, I've graduated high school, I'm a real adult, and part of being a real adult is getting a job and getting your own place. If I could have just stayed there with my parents and continued to take the money I was spending on rent, and not only rent, but I still had to pay utilities and all the other stuff that comes along with having your own place. I could have greatly started to have a larger nest egg and have the benefits of that compounding come to you. So, did you have any particular feelings, Eric, when you were sitting there living with your parents for those couple years after you had graduated high school? Were you able to like kind of apparently able to block out the noise from like, hey, not being concerned about what other people thought, but just kind of internally, how did you process that?
Yeah, definitely. I'll start there, and then
Okay.
I'll go back to the other piece of the wanting to spend, or like the temptation versus living within your means. So
Mm,
yeah, it was definitely there, right? I knew. I mean, most of my friends were not doing that, and at the time, I had a lot of friends that were after college moving different places, but the ones that were that were living in San Diego, I had friends that were moving in together, and they started paying rent, and there were options, to join them or to do that, and I was definitely tempted. And I missed that aspect of it, of living with my friends, which I had just done, in college for the previous years, which were amazing.
mm,
But I guess I was driven by, that desire to, I don't want to even say make the right financial moves at the time, because I kind of was aware that I was doing the right thing, but it really was, I wanted to save up money. I wanted to be able to buy a condo or put a down payment on something to be able to start paying a mortgage rather than paying rent. And that was honestly one of the biggest things that drove me at the time. And I
mm,
realized, I was like, hey, I have this opportunity. My parents, very giving and very supportive in that way to allow me to, because I
mm.
realized not all parents are like that, right?
Right.
And I also, I did, I wanted to spend some quality time with my family, with my parents, and
Mm.
that was nice. Not always easy, right? Certainly stressful at times,
Hmm.
and not the most glamorous.
Right.
But at the time, it really was. I was spending most of my time was spent at work, or in commute to and from work. And then after work, I would go to the gym and I would work. So I really wasn't spending that much time at home, actually. So it wasn't that bad. But
Mm,
when I was enjoying my time with my family. But it was that drive to make the right moves, to save as much as I could to make that down payment. Now, things certainly changed, right? As I learned with movement and real estate, and it wasn't the path that I wanted to go, or at least, again, I didn't want to sacrifice where I wanted to live. And then I learned, thankfully, right? And I'm still renting,
mm,
because I think that that's a great option for people, especially within financial independence, that don't want to be tied down by a mortgage. It
mm.
can be a good option, but it doesn't have to be that path. But that was the biggest thing that drove me. And it was definitely one of the smartest financial moves I made, because it allowed me to get my ducks in order and set up my financial system, make the right moves, focus on investing, doing all that stuff while I had more of that disposable income available to me. That anything again after that, once I moved out, started paying rent, and my expenses went up, I was already kind of set in
Mm.
that path, which was great. So, and I guess I'll pivot to the living below your means. That definitely was a temptation as well. I remember seeing a lot of my friends, when I was still in college and they graduated, they went out and got jobs, and I remember one of them specifically, started making $100,000, and
Oh,
he came
wow.
back and he was wearing these like $500 pair of shoes, like these leather shoes. And he was so proud of them. And I was like, man, those are awesome. But I was like, I'm not paying $500 for a pair of shoes. It'd
Yeah.
be crazy. And I had other friends that, went out and bought a new Mercedes Benz and new cars and all that stuff. And again,
Mm,
I liked, things at the time, but I was like, that doesn't seem worth it, right?
right.
That doesn't make sense. Something in my mind just that didn't register. And I think the biggest thing for me was I've always been a naturally frugal person, right? And
Mm,
I love saying the word frugal. That seems like a dirty word to a lot
yeah.
of people in
Yeah,
the
they
community,
do.
right? Even within my family, right? Like that was kind of a, oh, you're stingy or you're frugal and all that. And it's like, no, I'm intentional with my money. I'm going to spend on things that bring me joy and that make my life better.
Hmm.
And if it doesn't, that's not worth it for me, And I've always been that way. I've always been a natural saver versus spender. I like, right, and most of the time it's been to my detriment. I've
Hmm.
had to learn recently how to spend more and spend intentionally, because I just love. Um, I think the biggest thing that I love about money, making money, earning, saving, all that stuff is just the options that it provides.
Mm,
And for me, that's always been more important than the actual things that it can buy. So it's always been the options, the freedom. So
hmm.
I mean, I have had jobs since I was a kid, right? Of watering lawns, picking up, neighbors' newspapers, feeding their pets, babysitting, working at the farmer's market. Um, so many running a golf camp, all this stuff, jobs from when I was a kid all the way through high school and even in college. So I've always been making money. I like working. I like just doing stuff. And I like learning. But I've always saved more than I've spent. And I've liked watching the accumulation. Oh, wow, like this is what my money's done. Now it's always been in a savings account, because I didn't know anything about investing, right? My parents
Hmm.
didn't know about investing, didn't teach me that, but it was always, they did instill the importance of saving for a rainy day and putting it in the bank account. So I definitely instilled the habit of saving, which is great.
Hmm.
And so then once I got to the point of starting work, that was already right. That habit was there, living below my means, saving, and then I learned how to invest, and that's what really catapulted it, and really took it to the next level.
Yeah. Well, I I like you, Eric. I was kind of frugal by default. That's just kind of where I was. I mean, I have a brother, and we have the same mom, same dad, grew up in the same household, but his kind of approach was very different from mine as far as when it
Mm,
came to stuff. He believed in, like really nice watches and stuff like that. And I was always kind of like, I was like, well, it's like I can get the same time off like a way cheaper watch. I don't get it. But so it never was really a stretch for me to live below my means.
mm,
But the thing is that it was still that knowledge gap, like you said, like, I know I
mhm,
need to save my money for a rainy day, but how can I optimize this money that I'm saving? And so I have to ask you, I know from my research, Eric, that you started investing around like 22, I think,
mhm.
in equities and the
Yes.
stock market and stuff like that. And so two questions. First of all, what got you to the point where like, okay, well, I'm going to take this next step to doing that? And then my second question is that you also referenced a book that exposed you to FI. And
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure it's not Rich Dad, Poor Dad, because I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You see, it's a real estate book, and that's like the most popular real estate book, but they
Yeah.
don't talk about fire inside there. So I'm
Yeah.
interested to know what book that was. But first question is, what made you, confident or made you take that next step to going from just saving money to investing that money?
Yeah. So yeah, the first one, going from saving to investing, it really was when I started work, when I started my traditional job, and that was or automatically, or at least when I signed up, it was, um, enrolling in the 401(k), right, and
Oh,
doing
okay.
that, and I was very, it was the automatic and enroll, and then at certain contribution, and then I learned about the employer match, so I was very interested. I was like, oh, this is exciting, right? They're giving me
Mm,
money, or like do this, and so
hmm.
I definitely took that as a, and again, I love learning, and I love learning all that stuff. So I was interested, and then I wanted to learn everything about it. And so I was, dove in, learned about the different investments and everything. It was very overwhelming at first,
Hmm.
certainly, right? As you're looking at it, it's like, what do I do here? And what are all these investments? And what does that mean? But I definitely, that was the start, of just making sure I was doing that. And I made a lot of wrong decisions early on,
Mm,
right? And investing in certain things and trying to get way too complicated, way more than it needs to be.
hmm.
But at the time, it was, yeah, doing that with my 401(k). And then I had a coworker, that was very passionate about investing as well. His dad was an investor, so we kind of like would meet up every once in a while and just chat about it. And he's the one
Wow.
that really got me into, with my Roth IRA and doing all that. And same thing, right? made a
Mhm.
lot of wrong investments of certain stuff just based on hot tips or whatever. I remember I used to get Money Magazine
Uh-huh.
when it
I
was an
remember Money
actual
Magazine.
when it was an
Yeah.
actual magazine. And I loved it, right? And I'd read it and everything. And so that's where I got a lot of the education and the tips as well. But I
Mhm.
remember they always had their list of like the best index funds, the top 10 or whatever. And I look back at it now and I just laugh because it's like, yeah, I mean, that's, they're all pushing certain ones and certain ones. And it's like, again, best over a certain time frame. So I tried to get way too complicated with it. I definitely could have. Wish that I would have gone back in time and implemented, the simple path and just, simple index funds, S&P 500, total stock market. Now,
Mhm.
I've done all right, right? I'm coming through saying that from a privileged position. But that's what I always like to help people as well early in their path where investing is overwhelming and they're getting this stuff and they aren't as passionate about learning and nerding out on it as I was. Keep it simple. And there's ways to do that. So for me, yeah, it was definitely starting work, getting my 401k, taking advantage of that, learning about the Roth IRA. I remember it, and funny as I say that, I remember a high school class that I had. I was a senior in high school, and my teacher, and this is either I think it was my physics class. He spent a whole day talking about compound interest in a Roth IRA, literally an entire class, and just the
Mhm.
power of it, and like if you start investing in your life. And he was again talking to us as high school students, 17 years old, 18 years old, where a lot of us did have jobs and could have started doing it then, of starting investing, right, in taxable income. No, I didn't because it was overwhelming and I didn't know. And I remember I went home and asked my parents, I was like, how do I do this? And they told me, oh, go talk to your neighbor who is an investor and all that. I'm like, I'm not going to go talk to my neighbor, So I could have done it earlier on. But I remember that stuck with me and that still does. And I remember as
Mhm.
soon as I started my traditional job and did that, um,
Mhm.
I was like, oh, I'm doing this. I took advantage of it.
Okay.
So it's just
So
yeah,
so Eric, I gotta give a shout out first of all. All right. Do you
yeah.
remember the name of the school, the name of
Oh,
the
yeah.
teacher? What was it?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. Absolutely. I went to St. Augustine High School in San Diego,
mhm.
all boys Catholic school, and the teacher was Mr. Ranny. Mr.
Mr.
Ranny, he was my golf coach. He was my AP calculus teacher, my physics teacher.
Oh,
So,
wow. Okay.
Mr. Ranny, thank you. You instilled that piece of wisdom in my brain that stuck with me, and I wish I would have implemented it. When I was 17 or 18, when you first told me, and I was making money and couldn't have done it. But I did it as soon as I could, and I thank you for that.
Wow, that is awesome. But oftentimes, there's a concept that, someone initially plants the seed, other people comes behind it, they water, and at some point there's an
Mhm,
increase. Just kind of that seed that was planted from him in that class,
mhm,
he's like, I kind of heard this before. And another interesting thing that you kind of mentioned is that, hey, you know what? You went and you talked to your parents. Your parents really that wasn't something they were sharing with. And they like, hey, they kind of pointed you to the neighbor, and that's why us as parents or uncles, aunties, it's important for us to have that kind of insight, that knowledge that if we do have a inquisitive niece or nephew, son, daughter, that we'll be able to provide them with sound guidance around. Hey, you know what? Oh, I'm happy that you asked for that question. Let me explain this to you. So it's extremely important that we have that information. So it's great that you were given that, and that it kind of like planted the seed, and then you're actually able to act on it. Some years later, not too late, because I believe you said at 22 that you started, actually doing those things. You made reference to the kind of automatic kind of enrollment at your employer, also with the match. A lot of people don't want to do that because they're living so close to like their threshold that they don't have that surplus once again to be able to participate in those plans. And one of
yeah.
the biggest things that you did kind of starting off, Eric, is that when you get accustomed to doing that, you don't have to learn how to do it later on. So you were always used to this is part of my budgeting. This is a line item that I know that every whenever I'm getting paid, I'm having however many number of percent go to my 401k. I'm having however many dollars go to my Roth. This is just part of how I live, and that's extremely important. My kids understand, especially my daughters really get this. My son knows it, but my daughter, she's like really like taking it all on. And she says, when you get money, Daddy says 50, 40, 10. He
Mm,
says live off half, invest 40, give away 10. And that's
mm,
literally the premise that I've tried to get them to live off of, because if you can invest close to half of what you bring in as far as having a savings rate, they could be in a situation like you, Eric, when you have a very aggressive or very intentional savings rate. you can quickly get to where you no longer have to have that exchange that time for money. And
Yeah.
as you reference choices, you at this point, you have choices. It allows you to do what you want to do, how you want to do it. Do you want to go garden or take your dog walk and do whatever you want to do is extremely important. And
Yeah.
you can't do that until you have knowledge. And that kind of gets us into, I guess, your current kind of purpose is that you have learned to fire, right? And so, kind of our intro, you said that you want to share with individuals that what you're doing is not an anomaly, with some very intentional activities and some a mindset that you can get to where you can attain financial independence. And so, if you can just kind of share like kind of what you're doing now or elaborate on what you're doing now, because you've hit financial independence, you're now able to go out and you are now basically evangelizing kind of what you've done and showing people how they can do it.
Yeah, you nailed it right there. That's what I was
Mhm.
gonna say. And I don't really describe myself as an evangelist, but I think about that in the same energy, in the same way, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
not, I guess, um, in a way to where I just want to spread awareness, right? I just
Mhm.
want to make people aware that there are other ways to live your life and other ways to do it financially than the traditional path that has been instilled in most of us by your family, by society, right? By all of this of or just seeing other people and doing that of just working a traditional job that most people, right, aren't very fulfilled or aren't happy with, or they're just spending majority of their time there. And again, they're not able to focus their time and energy and resources on the things that are most valuable to them until way later, right? And I think that's the key that I'm just trying to help people shed some light on this alternative path,
Mhm.
and also spread awareness on the fact that it's not one way, right? And that's the big
Mhm.
thing within the FIRE movement. And thankfully, there's been big evolution, certainly at least in over the past several years. Since I've been involved, but it really isn't one way, right? It's not, living, as cheaply as possible, saving everything, living this frugal life and not spending it all just so that you can reach this FIRE number and just so that you can retire early. That's not what it is. It can be, but it's really just spending intentionally in the things that you value and setting up your financial system so that you have options. And again, whether that means leaving your job and never working again, taking a year off, taking 5 years off, doing these little mini retirements, or just working less and spending more of your time on other things, that bring you joy and that you value. So that's what I'm all about right now. And so it really is just spreading that awareness, working with people on that resonates with, right? And hey, if that resonates with you, I'd love to have a conversation with you. I love just talking about money. It's something that most of us don't do enough of because it's mostly taboo, right?
Mhm.
And it's most people are afraid of talking about money because they didn't learn it, they don't feel comfortable about it, or they feel embarrassed because they don't know or they don't have all the answers. And it's like, we need to break that. We need to be
Mhm.
talking more about it. Money affects every aspect of our lives, whether we like it or not. And just the only way to get better at it is to actually talk about it. And all of us
Mhm.
have something to learn from each other, right? None of us have
Mhm.
the answers. None of us have the exact way. Like that's why I love talking about it because I'm always learning from other people. I'm getting inspired. I'm like, oh wow, I didn't think about it that way. And from my clients, even right as I'm helping them, it allows me to think about things from their point of view in their situation that helps me help them better, but also helps me reach a different audience that I might not have been as attuned to or as prepared to help. So I really just love, yeah, just helping other people and talking about it and learning. Like that's my ethos, that's my mission. Make the world a better place. And I truly believe, right, that hey, for every, it's not even about the, help a million people or, all that. Like, yeah, I'll get some ambitious goals at some point. And that's fun. But right now, it's really the one-on-one connections that I'm really trying to build and trying to help people on a personal level. Because I truly believe it's for every individual person that I can help. Um, and if that's just free up a little bit of energy, right, that they were stressed about money, it's like, what can they do with that energy now, right? How can they then focus that on the things that matter most to them, which, I think in a lot of people, it's making the world a better place in their own way, whether that's
Mhm.
being more present again for themselves, just to figure it out, or being there for family that needs them or friends, or working on something that more passionate about and taking some risks, right? starting that business or that idea that they maybe were too cautious or a little bit nervous about because they didn't think they could financially. But if they can do that, I mean, it's amazing when I think about it. It's like, what can they then do with that energy and that time and their money and their resources to make the world a better place in their own way? And then I
Hmm.
think about the ripple effect, right? Like all those little things, if that one individual person, or if I can help 10 people or 100 people or 1,000 people, like all of their little aspects, then it's the compound effect, right? Like their
Right.
little ripples, who can they help, right? What can they
Hmm.
do to make the world a better place? And so I'm
Yeah.
just trying to do my part, and I'm having fun doing it.
Yeah.
It's
No, I think
been a good
that,
journey, and I'm very privileged. I'm very happy that I've been able to again find this, set myself up in this way, so that I'm able to do this.
yeah.
But
No,
yeah, I'm having fun.
yeah, I think that's great as far as, most people in the financial independence community who have gotten to the point where they no longer have to exchange their time for money, most of them do a good amount of some type of volunteering. I've found that, they're doing something where there's, with the local humane societies, if it's, Habitat for Humanity, I mean, anything, they're just trying to find ways they can go ahead that, how can I pay it forward? And so
Mm-hmm.
I think it's definitely a great cause that you have there, Eric. Now, one thing I did not ask you, and I believe I know the answer, but I know at one point you mentioned real estate. Did you obtain your financial independence strictly through equities? Do you have like any real estate, or was it all just, hey, Roth 401k kind of brokerage accounts?
Yeah, no real estate, which is surprising, right? When I first
Yeah.
started, that was what I thought was the only way. Because again, that's what I was taught. That's what I had friends, family, and that did that way, right? They got real estate, and so that's what I thought was the way. But
Hmm.
I quickly learned, I was like, well, that's not the only way, and that isn't my way. Like I that's not necessarily passive, right? That's
Hmm.
active. It can be a really good one, and it definitely is a part of my future plans. But no real estate thus far. It
Hmm.
strictly has been equities with traditional retirement accounts, as well as my brokerage was the biggest thing, right? The biggest thing that I wish I would have learned earlier as well. But that's
Uh,
the biggest thing that set me up for at least the early retirement piece to be able to fund this lifestyle now.
hmm.
But definitely looking into real estate as we look at what's our next move, right? Where do we want to be? We want some land. We want to be more free. I mean, I have my grand visions of hosting my property where I have my retreats for
Ah.
financial independence, retire early, as well as my wife and doing her creative endeavors. So we'll
Mhm.
get there,
Mhm.
and that's something that's always on my mind, definitely as I'm looking at it, but
Mhm.
not yet.
Yeah, but the great part about it is, like you said, Eric, you have choices, which
Yeah.
is amazing. Now, we gave a bit of a cliffhanger. And this cliffhanger was the book that you were reading
Yes, yes.
about real
I remembered.
estate.
I was gonna circle back.
Yeah, yeah. And so I'm interested to know, what was this book that exposed you? I got a feeling that it was probably something from out of Bigger Pockets Publishing. That's gonna be an assumption, but I'm gonna wait to actually hear the answer.
Yeah, you're on the right track.
Okay.
So it definitely was. It was a Bigger Pockets book. I
Mhm.
didn't know about Bigger Pockets. And this is again at the time where I thought real estate was the only way, right? I thought that was the only way out. I was feeling it was right. I think it was. It was right around COVID, and I realized I was
Mhm.
like, man, I want more of this. I want to be home. I want to be spending time with my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, with my dog. We just got our new puppy, and I was like, man, this is the joy of my life right now. And I was spending time in my garden and just feeling more free than ever. And still working, right? Spending a lot of time on calls and doing all that, but realizing I was like, man, I need a way out. And I
Mhm.
thought real estate was the only way. So I started educating myself, and I had a friend who was a real estate in real estate, or at least in the financing piece of it. And he recommended. I asked him, I'm like, "What do you recommend?" And he recommended this book that was I think it was Long Distance Real Estate Investing. And I think it was by David Green,
David
one of the bigger
Green. That was
pockets.
him.
Yeah.
Yep, that was him.
And at the time, because I was like California, right? I was looking at it, I'm like, California is so expensive. I'm like,
Mhm.
initially, just to get down payment and all that, I was like, I need something out of state. So I was like, okay, how can I do that? Read this book, was interested, but again, it was like it seemed like a lot more work than I could take on at the time, still doing my traditional job, and everything else that was going on in my life. But it did lead me then to Bigger Pockets, which then I researched Bigger Pockets, found out that they had a Bigger Pockets Money podcast,
Mhm.
and I started listening to that one, loved it. And then
Mhm.
from that one, it was the rabbit holes, man. Like I wish I would have been keeping track of it, because it's like
Mhm.
it was crazy, man. I'd listen to the episodes, and then I would hear this guest, or I'd hear them reference this, and then different podcasts, and then I'd go, and then I found out about Choose F.I.R.E, and I found out about all these other ones, the Stacking Benjamin Show, the Mad Scientist, Afford Anything, all of these other than more fire focused podcasts, and then all the other books, right? And then I started reading everything. I was digesting everything. Definitely went a little bit overboard. I was obsessed, but I loved it. I just wanted to learn and soak up as much knowledge as possible. But then I really had to shift that from the knowledge accumulation to the actual taking action
Yeah.
piece of it. So, but I'm very thankful for it because it opened my eyes to all of that. And again,
Mhm.
seeing that I was already there in a way. I'd always been so future focused, right? I was investing for the future and doing all this stuff. And it really helped me shift that focus and realize like, I'm already there, at least to a level, right? And it's a spectrum. Financial independence is a spectrum. It's not the finish line. And I'm already there on so many different levels. So I needed to really feel that and feel that gratitude and that appreciation and presentness if I'm here versus constantly grinding and working for this future. And I also had a huge, shift in focus, thankfully for COVID, where I was realizing I was like, man, I've been working so hard for this future and for setting my future family up, right? Like I always wanted to be the person that was there for my family. I didn't want to be the one that was stuck at the office and not there for my son's baseball game or my daughter's dance lesson or whatever. And I had this huge realization, right? Where I was like there with my girlfriend at the time who, knew that I was going to marry. We just got married this past year. We've been together for 14 years. Knew that was my
Congrats.
partner. Thank you. Knew that was my partner. We just got our dog and had my puppy. And I was like, had this realization. I was like, this is my family now. My family needs me now, not this version of me in 10 years or 20 years or whatever it is that needs me. My family needs me now. And I want to be there for them now. And so how do I do that? And that was, figuring out a way to take advantage of the situation I was in, the financial foundation that I had built, and lean into the financial independence that I had built, and really live that life now, and shift that focus into the present moment versus constantly living for the future, which was
Mhm.
huge.
Oh, that is awesome. Well, Eric, you've had a great story that you shared here with us. We appreciate it. For those who are out in our audience who want to continue to follow what you're doing, as far as getting those nuggets of information and just kind of seeing what you're doing in your current endeavors when it comes to your ability to make choices when it comes to financial independence. What's the best way for folks to follow you?
Yeah, definitely. Best way to follow me is through Instagram. It's learn to fire the number two. So learn number two fire. That's where I'm on Instagram. I'm not that active. I'm trying to be more active. I launched earlier this year. I have a love-hate relationship with Instagram and social media, but
I
I realize it's a
understand.
great way. It's a great way to get the message out there, and it's a great way to help other people. And I want to be that light that's helping people. And so if that one person can see a post that I make and that inspires them to go learn more or to reach out and work with me, then hey, I'm doing my job, and it's worth me putting myself out there. But definitely Instagram. I'll be launching my website. Not sure when this video is gonna be live, but I'll be launching my website later this year, and so then they can find out more information of how to work with me and all that. But yeah, Instagram right now. Send me a message, and let's have a conversation. Let's chat. I'd love to just see where you're at, see how I can help you, point you in the right direction, or just give you those little nuggets, right? The recommendations or resources just to go educate yourself, and help you on your journey. So that's definitely the best way.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Eric. I appreciate what you've shared here today and giving of your time. As we wrap up here, I am your host, Nik Johnson. As always, want to remind you to like, share, and subscribe. And even when things might seem challenging, trust the process because it'll work out. Have a great day. Thank you.